Alright, so welcome back to a deeper explanation of the cards of Everdell. So this is part 5. Let's continue on. So here we have the twig barge and the barge toad. Now, if you're going to build a twig barge in your town, you're going to need to pay 1 twig and 1 pebble to do so. But then once you have it in your town, once you play it in your town, you'll get 2 twigs. Awesome. Gain 2 twigs. That is awesome. And it's worth an extra point at the end of the game. And, of course, you'll get to activate this again when preparing for spring and autumn. Now, if you have a barge toad around after you play the twig barge, you can play the barge toad for free by putting the occupied token on this card. If you don't have the twig barge, then you will have to pay 2 berries in order to play the barge toad. Now, the barge toad is going to actually gain you 2 twigs for each farm in your city. The farm is one of the most common cards in the game, so it could be possible you have 2 or 3 farms in your town. If that was the case, and you also had the barge toad, you could get a ton of twigs as well. And that would be on when you play it as well as during preparing for spring and autumn. So that's pretty powerful. And these are worth each a point at the end of the game. All right, let's continue on. Next, we have the dungeon and the ranger. Now, the dungeon is pretty unique, but there's other cards that are similar in some respect. All right, so in order to play the dungeon in your town, you need a pebble, and you need 2 pebbles, sorry, and you need 1 resin. Now, since it is a blue governance card, it's going to usually activate when you play a construction or a critter card, and it does activate when playing a construction or a critter card. If that is the case, you may place a critter from your city face down beneath this dungeon to decrease the cost by 3 resources. That could be useful in 2 ways. True, it does reduce the cost by 3 resources, and that in its own right is very useful. Another thing it could be useful as, if you had a critter you did not want in your town anymore, you could put him in the dungeon and even up a spot. You'd have an extra slot available if you did that. And we all can think of at least one such fellow you would not want in your town, the fool. You might not want the fool in your town, since it's minus 2 points at the end of the game. So you could throw the fool down into the dungeon. So that could be very useful. And I can think of a few other critters that could be useful at the beginning of the game, but not so much at the end of the game, that might be worth putting in the dungeon, so that way you can put more useful critters and construction cards in your town. So that's pretty powerful for sure. Very, very useful. I like that a lot. And then, also, we have the ranger here. Now, if you have a dungeon, you get to play the ranger for free. Just don't forget to put an occupied token down here at the bottom. If you don't have a dungeon in your town, then you're going to have to pay 2 berries to play the ranger. And since it is a Tan Traveler card, it is going to you're only going to activate this effect 1 time through the game. And you can't play 2 rangers in your town. You're only allowed to have 1 ranger in your town because it is a unique critter. So this is a one-time use card. Now, this is what you can do with this one, is you can move one of your deployed workers to a new location. So that's pretty awesome. You have a worker that was sent to get you something very useful, and now this ranger here is allowing you to move one of those workers to another new location. That's really cool. That can be very powerful and useful for sure. Especially it gives you an extra turn to boot for later. Well, it doesn't give you an extra turn, but it gives you extra resources possibly. For sure. That is awesome. And then you'll notice it also unlocks the second dungeon. What that means is normally you can only have 1 person in your dungeon, and this is unique construction, so you're only going to be allowed to have 1 dungeon in your town anyways. So you'd only be able to do this ability 1 time because of that. But if you had the ranger in your town, you could actually put 2 people and throw them down in the dungeon. That's pretty powerful. Get to do this twice. That would be very powerful for sure. And so these 2 cards are awesome. Okay, let's move on. We're almost done with these cards. We just have a few more to go over. Next we have the castle and the king. And you'll notice that these are both purple prosperity cards. Now they're also very expensive too. Okay, so in order to build the castle, you need 2 twigs, 3 resin, and 3 pebbles to build it. And it's also worth 4 extra points at the end of the game. But then it's also going to give you 1 additional point for each common construction in your city. So that's pretty awesome, right? And then if you do manage to build the castle and your town, you can put the king, if you find him that is, and you can add him to your town for free, which is awesome. Because otherwise, if you didn't have the castle, you would have to pay probably 6 berries, because that's how much it costs to pay for the king. 6 berries. So that's an expensive card too. Now the king is also worth 4 points at the end of the game. And it's also going to give you 1 additional point for each basic event you achieved. What are the basic events? These are the basic events. If you achieved this, you'd get 1 extra point for this. What are the special events? Because you gain 2 additional points for each special event. Well, the special events are actually these cards here, which we'll go over later. So these are special event cards that you could complete, and you could get 2 additional points for each one of those you completed as well. So that's very powerful. You could get a ton of points for both of these cards. All right, let's move on. Next we have the Palace and the Queen, and this is technically our last pair, although there is one also very unique card left to go over. The Palace is going to cost you 2 twigs, 3 resin, and 3 pebbles to build, and it's one of those purple prosperity cards. Now, it's worth 4 points at the end of the game, and it's also going to give you 1 additional point for each unique construction in your city. Then, if you have the palace in your town, you can play the queen for free. Awesome, right? Just don't forget to put the occupied token here. Now, if you don't have the palace, you're going to have to pay 5 berries in order to play the queen. And this is one of those red destination cards too, which also happens to be worth 4 points at the end of the game. But if you place a worker here, you're going to play a card worth up to 3 points for free. That's pretty cool. So a card from your hand, if you put a worker here for free, as long as it's 3 points or less, that's pretty powerful. Very awesome combination for sure. Okay, now our last one, final one. Now this one is interesting. The Evertree is one of those purple prosperity cards. And in order to build it, you're going to need 3 twigs, 3 resin, and 3 pebbles. So that's probably the most expensive card you can construct in your town. That's 9 resources after all. But it is worth 5 points at the end of the game, plus 1 additional point for each purple prosperity card in your city. So that's powerful. Now here's what's interesting about it. If you have an Evertree in your town, you can play any one critter for free. Any critter of your choice for free. Just don't forget to put the occupied token at this corner saying that you got to do it already once. But that is powerful. And because it's a unique construction, you're only going to have one of these in your town. But that could be powerful. You could play the queen for free with it. You could pay the king for free with it. There's a lot of interesting things you could play for free with the Evertree for sure. And so that is awesome. Very awesome. So if you ever manage to build an Evertree, don't forget you're going to get to play a critter for free of your choice. That is awesome for sure. All right, and that is all of the critter and construction cards there is. Now, obviously, these are all the cards we went over here, and there's a whole bunch of cards here. That just shows you that there's more than one of most of these. Like I said, I think there's several farms, like 6 to 8 farms or something like that. So there's a lot of other cards in there that are these, but that's still awesome. So it is possible some of these could show up more than once, for sure. And then other times, there sometimes will be times when the one you want never shows up. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to cover the rest of these cards, the forest cards and the special event cards that are underneath them. We'll cover them in the next video.